like
The most
I like
intense
this kind of
weapon
thing.
fighting you can possibly do is not even remotely.
Okay, we're gonna do arm sparring. Stop and smell the plants and hug a tree. You hear that? Hug a tree. Not fuck a tree. I'm watching you, tree fuckers. Hey, Eru the Goblin King, welcome in. What a time to come in. Thank you for the follow. Welcome to the Delinquents. Damn hippies. Best response. No, I just remember some meme about like someone's like, gotta love the trees, and it was just like about some guy. I don't even know what country. It's like fucked a tree or something. So it's stuck in my mind. But yes, you may bonk a fool. If it's me, I swear to God. But okay, we're gonna watch the video on arm sparring.
Comparable to an aggravated assault with a weapon.
Okay.
Well,
this is the serious.
That's it.
Serious part.
I quit. I quit
Catch a
Hemo.
stream.
What's the
Yay!
point? There's
Yeah.
no point in it. I'm
Let's
gonna go break all
go.
my swords. I will trash my masks.
We're not druids. Exactly.
All right, here's a response to Ramsey Dewey. First off, this is not an attack, and I'm not here to go sword nerd mode like, actually. It's an interesting topic to discuss, though. Obviously, he has plenty of experience in unarmed martial arts, but when it comes to armed martial arts, he has a bit of a blind spot. That was an unintentional joke and kind of inappropriate too, because he has an actual blind spot in one of his eyes from head trauma. Anyway, so let's just get started and see what he has to say.
The concept of pressure testing in a previous video where I relentlessly mocked people who use the term pressure testing because they don't know how to fight.
In my mind, sparring is pressure testing. Maybe I'm just interpreting the term differently. I mean, it's semantics.
This is why I don't
Who
usually
really
talk
cares,
about like
right?
me
Okay,
liking
some people
these
do, but
things
I don't.
because
You
people take it so
cannot.
serial, and
That's the same way with
I
strikers.
take it as like just something.
Spar or the grappler's role. You can't.
Well, you can't do it the exact same way, that's true. But can you do it with the same purpose
Scares me.
and the same quality, so to speak? I would say yes, or at least close to it.
They actually hit each other with their fists and they kick each other for real.
Yeah, if you do weapon sparring, you hit each other with practice weapons, whether it be something made of nylon or polypropylene or wood or whatever, which is not the exact same, or blunt steel swords, which is
Look at that.
pretty
It's so
damn close.
cool.
It's again not the same because they're not sharp, so they don't bind the same way sharp blades do, but you still hit each other with steel blades through protective gear, obviously, because you can't hit each other for me. I mean, you're wearing gloves right now. I suppose a bare-knuckle fighter could use the same logic and say, hey, what are you doing right now?
exactly.
Not the same thing. You have big-ass gloves on. You're not.
Someone did
you
say
don't
that
even
to me,
know
that,
how hard you can punch
like,
each other in the
sword fighting
face
isn't as cool
barehanded
or
without
as
breaking your
extreme
hand.
because
Right,
you
so
don't actually hit with
every
real
kind
weapons.
of
I was like,
sparring
but like, look
is
at that. Look
somewhat
at the
limited,
magic of that
right?
fight.
But we'll
I
get
feel
back
like
to
you
that in a
still
moment.
learn the
He has more
skill.
to say.
There are variable levels of
Like,
intensity
even if
going
you're
from
not,
light contact
like, have
to
a
full
sharp
contact.
blade.
It's something that can be
I don't think you need to
repeatedly
KO someone
done
to have a
and
good time.
tested, and most of the time, nobody has to die. You cannot do that with weapons.
You can't do that with sharp weapons. No.
Okay,
but
technically
blunt
any kind
ones?
of fighting
course.
has a risk.
I mean, sure,
Boxers
soldiers
get
or
hurt
law enforcement officers
really
or
badly all the
anyone
time.
learning how to use firearms
smack
in a
the shit out of each
combat
other with-
situation
Yeah,
they
it's
can't
true. The
shoot
thumb
at each other
fine.
with live ammo. But they can shoot at each other with paintball guns, which, yeah, it's not the same, not by any means.
But it does show a number
that's
of
just
kills.
one tool. That's one
I'm going-
mode of
I'm
training,
dead,
if you
I'm
will.
down.
They can do
I'm on
that.
my
They
way
can do
out. I'm in a
actual
grave if
target
I get
practice with live ammo, just, not with living targets.
Yeah, we literally.
So
Okay,
those are-
I'm just gonna quickly say we literally have a slogan of one-hit kills because getting hit in the right spot in the back of your head once could kill you. Humans are feeble. Like that's an actual like slogan in Australia because of like it is really easy to actually accidentally kill someone.
So all different tools that come together to create well-rounded training.
You can do sparring with grappling. Close to
Rolling
100%,
cool, there are
if not
measures we take to mitigate
100%.
damage when practicing.
There are these practice
Exactly.
BJJ
And
robots
it's
that
the
let you
same
know
when
when
you
a
wear
shot
goggles
becomes
with, like,
lethal.
any
That would
kind
be
of, like,
100%,
paintball
wouldn't it?
or
At least
stuff,
relative to a
because those
real
are the
fight.
parts where
You
you can
can
actually get
spar
hurt.
100% relative to a tournament, but with practice weapons, you can also spar harder to the point where it approaches tournament intensity. Jiu-jitsu is out of my wheelhouse. I don't have practical experience with it, but doesn't it trace its origin back to battlefield use? Like when you say you spar at 100%, shouldn't you be dislocating joints and breaking bones. There are plenty of techniques in historical manuscripts that look a lot like what's still being practiced in various forms of grappling. The concept is still the same. You put the joint in a position where you have superior leverage and can force it past its natural range of motion. Except back then, when they did it for real in a duel or on the battlefield, they wouldn't gradually increase pressure until the other guy taps. They would just snap that shit. It's the same argument, really. You wouldn't stab your sparring partner with a knife or cut him with a sword, but would you snap his ankle or break his neck or tear the nerves in his spine when you're rolling?
The most intense weapon fighting you can possibly do is not even remotely comparable to an aggravated assault with a weapon.
If your point is that the gap is greater, you know, like between an unarmed brawl on the street and whatever self-defense practice, MMA sparring, and between armed sparring and like an actual fight with sharp weapons, yeah, I can agree with that. It escalates a couple more steps, shall we say. Even if you can end up with a crippling injury in an unarmed street fight, it's much less likely than with weapons. So yeah, there's absolutely a point there that's valid.
If you used a real knife, you wouldn't be able to do it again and again and again.
Same as with getting knocked out in sparring. You wouldn't be able to do it again and again because the brain damage will just accumulate too much.
If your technique falls apart against mild resistance, it's a crappy technique. But if your technique holds up against mild resistance, that still doesn't mean it's a good one.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I said there are different modes of practice. You have to drill techniques both by yourself and with a partner in different ways. You know, it ranges from what you might call slow work or very light sparring or moderate sparring or whatever. There's all these different tools to develop certain skills. You're not doing everything at once all the time. Sometimes you have to work specifically on footwork or specifically on your jab or your cross or whatever it happens to be. Certain problems, and there are certain tools
where you weren't supposed to hurt someone. You were supposed to show skill.
No.
Is laser tag pressure testing for a gunfight? Kinda.
Yeah, kinda. Particularly when it comes to a gunfight, you just can't do everything at once fully realistically. You can't shoot each other with real bullets and all that. You can have targets that pop up or move around or whatever. Sometimes they do drills where you have to run around and hit several targets and stay behind cover, and somebody might fire at you with blanks or whatever, which, you know, is a little bit closer.
Is it not as close because it doesn't have like a
push
kickback
it more
that
and more,
has
like how
guns do?
close you want to get, but of course there's always going to be an ultimate limit.
Gunfights aren't fun.
No, there's nothing fun about it. And this is something important to keep in mind when practicing really any martial art. You know, whether it be armed or unarmed or whatever, it's always good to be mindful of that and not just glorify violence or just have some kind of, you know, main character,
Like
hero complex. I would mow down a bunch of mooks and then shake the blood of my sword and sheathe it dramatically.
That's like one of my favorite
You could
movies,
absolutely have fun with it, because that's another point here. It depends on what the goal is.
Because it's fun,
of course,
it's in a controlled environment.
when you're practicing
The actual violence of
jiu-jitsu or some striking
actually
art or
hurting
MMA in
someone
general, whatever, you have some kind of goal in mind, right? You might want to compete. You can do that in HEMA too, or, you know, various other armed martial arts. In any martial arts, you can compete. You can do it for
the same as shooting
the
to
exercise,
kill
for the
someone, but I
fun,
would say
for the
like
community. There are so many different reasons
like
to do it.
paintball is
Some
closer to
friends who
shooting
went overseas
than
for
like
war,
a
and
first-person
they
shooter
didn't come
game.
back as the same person.
No, most people are fundamentally changed and damaged by war, and there needs to be way more effort and resources put into helping war veterans. I mean, how is it that someone can risk life and limb for their country to go to war somewhere and then come back and end up homeless? It's absolutely atrocious.
I think
anyway,
like
I don't want to get too
99% of
political,
people have never been
but
in a
that's something
gunfight.
that really can't be said often enough.
You go on some wacky adventures in this post-apocalyptic wilderness, and it's super fun in a video game.
In a video game.
But if you had to do that in real life, Fallout would suck
Oh, yes.
hard. Man.
I've often said that when people ask me, I go, what war would you want to fight in history? I'm like, none. Even when people ask, oh, okay, which battle would you want to watch?
No one want to be in a gunfight.
I'm like, none. Why? It's horrible. It's an absolute nightmare.
Going through a little
Exactly. It's the same,
stabby,
like,
knifey
I
game
find,
or
like,
something like that
the war,
is
like, medieval
not
wars
even remotely
interesting. Would I want to be in
with
any
an
of them?
actual
Hell
aggravated assault
no.
with a knife.
No worse place to be than
Absolutely.
medieval
I
times.
mean, the same way as when we're practicing MMA or any kind of martial art for self-defense.
It's very different.
To be better prepared for a situation like that. It's never the same, of course. Like, even if you try to up the ante and make it as stressful as possible, like there's multiple attackers and they really come at you and they scream at you and whatever, you try to make the practice as close to reality as possible. It's never quite the same thing, obviously.
really
but
feel like-
does that make the training useless? Knife attacks are just about the worst possible scenario. Unarmed versus knife. I mean, it's the vast majority of things that are taught, techniques, are just BS, just not practical, high risk. Everything is high risk, other than running away.
I guess that's the
You
thing.
have a
There's
very,
a big
very
difference
low
between the
chance
art of
of making
fighting
it
and
out of
practical
it.
fighting.
So it's definitely,
It's like the same with
whatever
duels,
kind
like
of
even
practice you
medieval
might do.
duels. There's the
It gives you a better chance than not doing
The-
it, but
arty
it's
way
just about
to
the
win,
worst.
and then there's the
But
winning
if you
at any
add
cost.
a knife each, like you practice
No,
a knife fight
do
or
not
dagger
bring up that
fight,
explicit again.
where
Oh my
both have a
God.
weapon, that's a very different situation, because now the attacker is not going to just try to rush in and steamroll you because they know they have a knife and you don't. If both have a knife, unless the attacker is completely insane or drugged out of their mind or whatever, in which case they're probably not as coordinated when it comes to fighting with machetes or swords, and both have one. It's of course also an extremely stressful, traumatizing event. It's high stakes.
It's like soldiers back in the
It's
day,
crazy,
no matter how
but in
trained they
history
were,
people
would, like,
had to do it.
freak
Some
the hell
even
out.
earned their living doing it. Professional mercenaries and soldiers. So they had to prepare somehow, right? You can't just say, well, the real thing is so much worse, it's so much more intense, it's so crazy that, there's
Exactly.
no point
Like,
in
they
practice. Why
they
even
trained
bother?
with blunt
You know,
weapons.
why bother?
All those people
Because
trained
it gives you a better
beforehand.
chance. Yes, the real thing is worse,
guy fought
but that
dirty.
doesn't invalidate the
That's the thing,
training.
there's the-
because they did
There's
train,
the noble
they
way
did
to
practice
fight, and then
techniques
there's just
to get
winning.
ready for the real thing. Whether it was just with sticks
It's the same with
or
war
with
and
blunt
tactics.
swords
It's the
or
same
whatever.
thing. There's
They
the
had
right
ways
way to
of
win.
training and practicing. Yeah,
know,
it wasn't
from-
quite the same thing,
and
but they
then
had to
there's
somehow prepare
some people
themselves to
who
have
win
a
at
chance
any cost.
to survive the real thing, to gain experience, right? Because if everyone dies in the
Exactly.
first duel or the
And as a
first
lot of people
battle,
point
then
out, the rules
they
of
can never
nobility
actually
and the
learn
same with
anything.
like
How many
Christian
of
rules
you
of
would be
fighting was
willing
just
to
there to make sure
participate
people weren't brutal
in
as
a
fuck.
duel
But it's exactly why
to
Vikings
first blood
swept
with a sword?
Christianity. Because
Yeah, I wouldn't.
They
There's
didn't have the
way too
same
much that can go
rules.
wrong. It would not be a sound
hit him
decision.
in the junk,
All right.
dirt in
but
the eye.
would you get into a bare knuckle fight without rules? Like just straight up nothing. The opponent can gouge your eyes, it can tear your ears off, biting, testicular torsion,
Fight
rip
club.
and tear until it's done. Would you do
Testicular
that?
torsion?
Or would you sign up for a
Oh,
BJJ
lordy.
match where breaking bones and dislocating joints is allowed?
Could you bring yourself to do it? But most of you would hesitate. Who wants to get stabbed or cut or slashed or hacked with a sword? I mean, it's not just receiving injury, it's giving injury.
I fully agree with all of that. And again, it's good to be aware of the limitations. Just because you've
way of fighting.
practiced whatever martial art or
Yeah.
self-defense system
Well, there's also
or whatever,
there's
it
easy,
that
but
doesn't mean
also
you're 100% ready
using
for a
all
real-life
options
encounter.
to you, I guess.
You're just more ready than you would have been if you hadn't done it, right? I mean, people still
learned
go
first
through
aid,
military
so
training
to get
designed to
injuries.
make them ready for war. How ready can they ever be? It's a different story.
Like
It's
with the
always
key
going to
between-
be a
exactly.
shock. It's
So you
always
gotta
going
do
to be
what you gotta do.
traumatizing. You're never really fully ready, of course, but that doesn't invalidate military training.
A lot of people are surprised when they get into
Yeah, that's a very
fight,
common
amateur
way
or
for
professional, even if they're sparring.
the
The gym
underdog
is
to
very
win
intense
in a lot of
because of all of the
situations
psychological
is
factors.
with like
The
not
performance
noble
anxiety,
tactics
for
or
one.
non-traditional tactics.
all the
It's
eyeballs on you.
realistically the main way to win over
It's simply
a bigger
not the
force.
same thing.
The equivalent would be a HEMA tournament. There are no professional HEMA fighters who get paid for it, as far as I know, but it's the same kind of dynamic. Yes, it's more intense than sparring. You know, everybody is hyped on adrenaline. Everybody hits harder, even if they don't mean to. So it hurts a lot more.
I'm pretty sure it's similar
The
how
injury
Finland
risk
like
is much
pushed back
higher
Russia, wasn't it?
in a
Also
tournament.
just like
And yeah, everything is
like,
just more intense. That's also why
being
it's
small
a good
numbers had an
experience to
advantage,
have.
like,
The same way
it was-
as being in the ring with gloves on, with a referee and rules and medical professionals standing by is not the same as suddenly being jumped on the street. Right? And by the way, I'm not using that argument the way it's sometimes used by those, self-defense masters who are like, well,
On the street without rules and all that, I could take Conor McGregor.
the absence of rules doesn't compensate for lack of skill, and plenty of street fighters have gotten their ass handed to them by professional fighters when they challenged. But either way, it's never like the real thing. It's not supposed to be, because it wouldn't be sustainable. It wouldn't be
guerrilla
sustainable for
warfare always
unarmed
coming
fighting
in
either.
clutch.
If you constantly go bare knuckle and get knocked out, or if curb stomping is allowed, or if
Curb
someone can
stomping,
pick up a
the
brick and
Australian
smash it in your
power move.
face in sparring, you're not really going to be able to do it for very long. So it's just an inherent limitation, and there's nothing wrong with that, really. Again, depends on the purpose as well. If you're just doing HEMA or whatever martial art, really just for fun exercise, and because it's a cool activity to do with the other people who are into it,
yeah. Well,
that's great.
A
Nothing
lot of
wrong with it.
martial
You don't
arts are
have to
regarded like an art
prepare
form,
for
not just a
war
fighting.
every time. In
So
most
it's like-
cases, most people who practice any kind of martial art don't prepare for the absolute worst case scenario where they have to fight for their life. Of course, there are additional limitations with armed sparring that you don't have with unarmed. Unarmed, you're wearing gloves, whether it be boxing gloves or MMA gloves, maybe headgear, maybe shin guards. When you're practicing with
like
swords,
saying
even when you're
kendo.
simulating unarmored fighting, you
it's
still have to
similar. It's a
armor
safe
up.
way to
You
practice,
still have to
like,
put
dual
on a
techniques.
helmet or fencing mask, or gorget, a jacket or gambeson, or some kind of torso armor. You have to protect your joints. You have to put on gauntlets. You have to.
Those are
Like,
them
all
sending
this
gorillas.
stuff is
That would
really
be hilarious,
cumbersome. It
imagine.
reduces your
Just remind me of the
dexterity.
Russian
It
bear or
slows you
whatever.
down. It's
The
hot as
Russian
hell.
bear. Some country
It's
had a
really
bear in
uncomfortable,
their army.
and it just adds additional difficulty, and it sucks. Yeah, that part absolutely sucks. But you're still hitting each other with blades, albeit blunt, and you'll definitely figure out what works and what doesn't. Anyway, check out Ramsey's video. I'm linking it in the description. Even though there are some things I disagree with, there are plenty of good points, and as said, he has a lot of
I
experience.
do like that
He
he
definitely
had a
knows what he's
retort
talking
back to him.
about when it comes to
and he kept
unarmed
it
martial
civil.
arts, and a lot of it carries
Finland?
over
Damn.
to armed martial arts, and he has clearly been pressure tested. Anyway, thanks for watching.
Pressure tested.
Take care, folks.
Oh, cereal.